Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sonic Impressions. This is a concert and talk inspired by the exhibition on view in the Docent Gallery here at the Memorial Art Gallery. This exhibition is entitled, as you may know, Renaissance Impressions, 16th-Century Master Prints from the Kirk Edward Long Collection. My name is Lauren Tagliaferro. I'm an assistant curator here at the MAG. And I want to start off by saying thank you to everyone who is joining us, and a special thank you to Senso di Voce and Nancy Norwood for also being with us virtually today. I would like to introduce Senso di Voce. Senso di Voce is Esin Gunduz. She does voice, composition, and harmonium, and Megan Kyle, who plays the oboe and the English horn. So in Sonic Impressions, the duo presents a musical program that reflects and recontextualizes selected artworks from the Renaissance Impressions exhibition, highlighting aesthetic links amongst the sacred, the grotesque, and the sublime in this extraordinary print collection. Through poignant Renaissance motets, a heartrending medieval troubadour song, and the transcendent sounds of Sicilian, Sardinian, and Anatolian folk musical traditions, Senso di Voce illuminates connections of timbre, embodied sensation, and emotional impact in order to bridge apparent divides of history and geography. Skillfully crafted transitions transport audiences from the sound world of one piece to the next and from one artwork to the next. Esin and Megan, will you mind telling our audience a little bit about yourselves?
Hello, my name is Esin Gündüz, and I'm a composer and a vocal performer. I was the type of kid who cried at the archaeological museums, and I've always been interested in ancient or old culture. So as a composer, these topics still inspire me. In 2019, I've composed a piece about medieval alchemy for the New York City Duo Ultrafis. And since 2013, I've been interested in studying ancient Sumerian culture, and especially the tablets about goddess Inanna. This past November, I presented my work Lights on Inanna during the Society of Bible Literature's annual meeting in San Antonio, Texas. And my latest work around the Sumerian literature, it's called Enheduanna Man. I am Enheduanna, and it was commissioned by this British mezzo-soprano called Rosie Middleton for her Voiceless commissioning series. Enheduanna Man is a work about the struggle and resistance of a silent woman becoming resonant again. So it's for voice and electronics. So the audience hears her live performance as an amalgam of her live voice and the samples of her, recordings, the samples of, the recordings of her voice. So this work was programmed for Iceland Dark Music Days and later premiered for Non-Classical and Waterloo Festival. And it got its second performance at Eclectic Art Lab, all venues in London. And this year I received the Chamber Music America's Classical Commissioning Award with Senso di Voce. So with that, I'm composing a 20-minute new work for Megan and me, and that is inspired by the philosophical writings of the Sufi mystic Ibn Arabi. Next to being a composer, I'm a vocalist who leads her own projects, and I have a PhD in music composition and an undergrad degree in voice degree and vocal performance and composition. So, Megan.
Hi, yeah, I'm Megan Kyle. I'm an oboist based in Buffalo who performs as a soloist, improviser, chamber musician, orchestral musician. I'm fascinated by expressive possibilities and unexpected acoustic phenomena on the oboe, and I really love to experiment with microtonality, multiphonics, and timbral variation. So aside from my work in Senso di Voce, I also perform and create music with the new music ensemble Wooden Cities, the musical research group Null Point, and the oboe, piano, violin, cello quartet, the Evolutionary Arm. I perform as a substitute with various professional orchestras, including Buffalo, Rochester, and Charleston. I teach oboe and English horn at Houghton College, at SUNY Geneseo, and SUNY at Buffalo. And I've also studied some art history on the side. I was a volunteer student docent at Oberlin during my undergrad at the art museum there. And I also studied Italian art as part of a semester abroad in Siena, Italy. So I'm particularly excited about this project for those reasons.
Wonderful, thank you both. Nancy, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Nancy Norwood. I'm the curator for European art here at MAG, and I was the presenting curator for Renaissance Impressions. which I do want to mention closes today. So this is our big finale, and I'm very, very excited about this. The exhibition itself was organized by the American Federation of Arts. It's a fantastic show, and I was very, very happy that Ethan and Megan could work with us on this, because during the Renaissance, of course, music and art were completely intertwined, and so to have this happen again during the run of the show was wonderful. So I thank you both for that, and I think everybody's really going to enjoy this video, and I can't wait to hear the responses to it after it's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Senso di Voce's concert, which will be presented as a video piece. This was recorded safely inside the Docent Gallery, and it showcases immersive footage of the duo performing inside the gallery, as well as the artwork their music engages with from the exhibition. Senso di Voce invites our community to experience this concert away from other distractions as much as possible, immersing themselves in the details of the wonderful artworks and opening their ears to the sensory experiences that these sounds create. So in that way, we recommend listening with headphones or stereo speakers if possible. So without further ado, please enjoy the concert. What a beautiful film. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to just start with maybe a couple of questions for both Senso di Voce and for Nancy to kind of talk through their, the inspiration behind these pieces and the artwork that they chose, and Nancy's responses to them as well. So my first question is for Senso di Voce. So in the description that I read of this performance at the beginning of this webinar, and also in your dual work in general, you talk about recontextualizing the artwork and, quote, bridging apparent divides of history and geography. So can you talk a little bit about what you mean by this?
Sure. So our approach is centered on the idea of drawing connections across historical eras and from cultures on all sides of the Mediterranean basin. And we do this through sound color, like connections of sound color and timbre. Humanity doesn't really know how early music really sounded. And some music historians and musicologists think that the Western early music that we think as it is might have sounded a bit more Eastern than we think, So that's been our timbral connection of Western early music to the sacred and folk music from the Mediterranean basin. And in order to achieve continuity, we compose interludes, and those are structured but semi-improvised transitions. So they have the function of pulling us from one musical piece to the next and one artwork to the next through transformations.
Yeah, and I'll add that this relates to the way that we recontextualize the artwork, and that we're seeking these kinds of deeper connections between the music and the art for us and our audience as we go through. So, we're thinking about how, as we're contextualizing this Renaissance artwork, we don't only want to pair it with Renaissance era Western art music, which, for instance, is like the motets that we play early on in the program. So that's awesome, and that's part of it. But we also want to draw out some more unexpected resonances. So both with music that may have predated the art but still has a connection, and also with our semi-improvised interludes that Essen mentioned that are from the 21st century. There's so much experimentalism and strangeness going on in this art, as I'm sure everybody saw. And so we really wanted to bring out all these layers. We wanted a sort of more open perspective that doesn't put its main focus on titles and borders, even though we're aware of those things.
Wonderful, yeah. So I guess my next question is for Nancy in kind of response to this. So how has this interpretation of these artworks that Senso di Voce has done change or maybe enhance your view of the pieces themselves?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think it changed it. It simply added to it, which I think is better. I mean, and I loved the way, and also it has to do with how the videographer sort of panned these images sort of in time with the music. So that it was a whole sort of visual sound experience that wasn't just like if I had been in the gallery listening to them play and not looking at the work in such a close way. So I really, I mean, I know that, we've all been sort of stuck online for the last 2 years, but, there are some advantages, and I think that's one of them. And I think it for me too, this relationship between Renaissance art and music, and I really love the way that you did bring in more, especially your composition, because it, music is a living creature, as is art, and it's not restricted by time. And so to be able to pair the works with your own contemporary music, I think adds a lot to, it's not just sort of illustrating, it's actually feeling the art and the music and putting those together. And one thing that's always interested me so much about music in the Renaissance, it's a similar sort of thing where you have in the 16th century with the advent of publishing, so much you have, I mean, I learned this, many years ago, but you have, music being published at the same time that these prints are being published. And so it's a similar thing in that you don't have those same geographic restrictions anymore because music is traveling too. So the works that say that you were using that are Netherlandish, it's quite likely they could have landed in Italy quite easily as these prints landed in other parts of Europe. So, and I do think that Eastern connection, I don't know much about that, but I think that's very interesting. So I hope that answers your question, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love this this incorporation of Eastern sounds and Eastern influence on your music with regards to the Renaissance, because as we know, I mean, as art historians, we know that the Renaissance was not just, a bunch of white Italians doing their thing. It was Italy during this time period, and in France, and it was a real melting pot of people because there was a lot of goods and people traveling all over Europe and Western Asia. And so this music really incorporates that sense of movement and influence from different cultures, for sure. I guess my next question for Senso di Voce is, what is your internal and collaborative process for translating, a visual medium like these prints into an auditory one, which is your music?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for your comments. So music is a time-based art, while those prints are not. So as Nancy said, so having the eyes of the viewer travel through those images gave some filmic experience, thanks to our videographer. And this way we could save some part of the artwork to the end and build up some tension towards it. Or some of them looked much more interesting or in a different way when they were, seen in totality. So we kept those, to the end and zoomed out and showed the totality of the artwork after all the details. Also, we conceptualize this program as impressions of impressions of impressions. So what I mean by that is, for instance, Renaissance involves impressions of classical antiquity. Some of the Renaissance prints were impressions of the Renaissance paintings. And in the literal sense, printing technique requires pressing their impressions. And finally, our program, sonic impressions, are the impressions of the Renaissance prints. So we're interested in this process of artistic translation and transfer. So learn from the art instead of about, or remake them instead of representing, as again Nancy said. So and the most genuine way to work with extra musical materials for musical artists is to actually stay true to their own experiences while also deepening their understanding of the material and going deep inside them, I think. Megan?
Yeah, I'll add that we were thinking a lot about the techniques and effects and styles of the prints. So not just about their themes, although that was part of it, but we would ask ourselves, like, how can these printing techniques be represented in sound? How do etching, engraving, and woodcut techniques relate to musical and compositional techniques? And how can those sensory experiences that the prints create be expressed through sound? I also wanted to mention that we felt a really strong connection to the aesthetics of the sacred, the grotesque, and the sublime throughout the collection. We were fascinated by Lauren, your talk this past November on the sublime and the grotesque in this exhibition. And it was especially interesting to us in the depiction of religious stories, where that line between sacred and grotesque can be really blurred. And it reminds us that religious miracles are scary. Horror and wonder are often very close together. So we wanted to bring that out.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks for watching my talk. Yeah, I really enjoy this this kind of exploration of ugliness especially in Renaissance artwork, because again, like a layman thinks of Renaissance artwork as being extraordinarily beautiful and very, Judeo-Christian. You think about like depictions of Christ and these kinds of things, but there's like this kind of strange underbelly, and I'm sure Nancy can agree with me on this. There's this weirdness of these grotesques that were really popular, and there's a lot of like weirdness in that one print of Fury, which is deeply strange, and like the meaning of it has been kind of lost to history. And so I really enjoyed that strangeness, and I felt like that strangeness was kind of brought out in your music as well, this like mystery and sublimity and this kind of thing that yeah, it was just really beautiful. So Nancy, my next question for you is just basically, how does music, as an art historian, how does music tie into the art of the Renaissance?
Well, I think it's, it was everywhere in the Renaissance, and people danced, people played at home. There were new instruments that developed in the 16th century, and you know, every educated young woman was learning how to play virginal, which was a new instrument. And then you have instruments actually being decorated with artwork. You know, that, so it all sort of became one. And then you have these composers who are very erudite, and you also have these artists who are very erudite, and everybody's quoting everybody else. And there's an, you know, whether they're quoting music or literature or philosophy, you know, that notion of a Renaissance, we'll say, person, is very, very true. I mean, it was all tied together. And so to separate it out, it doesn't, it's an artifice if you separate these things out. So just as an art historian, I mean, for people who are in Rochester, you know, we have the luxury here at MAG of working closely with the Eastman School of Music. And so several years ago, I worked with one of the musicologists at Eastman on medieval art and music, and we have a kiosk up there, and he recorded, and then we, you know, we had a concert, and but it was talking about exactly that, but from, you know, a century or so earlier, well, right around at the same time, 15th, 16th century. So, you know, that's sort of how I feel about it. So it's really all, to separate it out is completely artificial. And so there is a balance that you have to find. And I think for performing artists, I remember, I mean, I've spoken a lot to, he teaches sacred music at Eastman, and he really, I mean, for him, sacred music is a living thing. So he also composes contemporary as well as, you know, the medieval and the Gregorian chant, things like that, and he teaches that. So it's a really interesting area that we could go on and on and on about for longer than we have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, this concept of the Renaissance man being someone, or person being someone who does it all, right? Like as a scientist and a mathematician and a geographer and you know, and an artist and an inventor and all of these things is, I mean, if you could speak a little bit more about this concept of, you know, right now we're kind of siloed to a certain extent, like, you know, you don't hear a lot about like scientists who are also artists. It seems to be kind of a, not anathema, but you know, unusual for that to happen, when in fact during the Renaissance and even in later eras, there was this real incorporation of scholarship being all of these things, right? It is a combination of, like, if you were in part of the intelligentsia, if you were a scholar, you were well versed and you worked frequently with all sorts of different, you know, media and that kind of thing.
I think it's interesting with, there are still some professions that, for example, I used to work many, many years ago, I worked for a mathematician, and he was part of a huge musical group of mathematicians. And at every mathematicians conference in the world, there was this whole group of people who played. And physicians are the same way, where they're like avocation is music, or collecting, or so there are still these fields that somehow attract people who have a strong, they're scientists, but they also have a strong avocation in the arts, whatever sort of tweak that taste. But it's not like it was in the 16th century, for sure. But yeah, I mean, and you see that a lot in the prints that are in the exhibition, that so many of them, the ones that are the strangest in a lot of ways, are actually quoting classical philosophy, 4th century, 5th century philosophers who are coming up with these things. And as you know, most people today aren't going to know those quotes unless they've, as you said, siloed their studies into early philosophy. When you know, there's just not that many people out there who are doing that. So that's why you have to write the labels so that people know what it is. But it's not just these strange figures splashed on a page. It's you know, it's referencing things, and like I said, it's erudition, and it's showing off. You know, these people, they weren't just craftspeople. One thing I wanted to mention that I did notice, when you were talking about technique and trying to think about technique, that's interesting to me, because I did notice that you used a lot of etchings, and they're so much softer in terms of how they present, that they worked really well with the music. And I thought, I was like, I wonder if they did that on purpose. And so obviously that's correct. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Like, to use an example, say the Parmigianino entombment, which is one of the most beautiful etchings, I think, in the show. What struck you about that, and what made you choose to pair what you paired with it? I'd just be really interested, like, with a specific example.
Yeah, I could jump on that. So yeah, you might notice that we did 2 entombments, and we like chose which entombment was going to go with which material. And I think the Parmigianino one, it has this like really ghostly kind of feeling. And so it's like, yes, it's the theme that relates to the piece that was about to come next, which is the Lament for Good Friday. And so it was like, it relates in that subject way, but then also we wanted to bring in this like sense of like preparing for that event, and like kind of the way we structured that was like Essen's kind of mournful cries, which involved the playing with the overtones, or kind of get us into this meditative kind of religious almost trance state, and then the English horn and the harmonica introduce this kind of almost like a call and response that they interrupt and have this commentary on, which felt like a religious service. And yeah, again, like I just felt like the feel of that matched up much better with the Parmigianino, as opposed to the sort of more definiteness of the woodcut in the next piece.
Yeah, definitely. I'll add that the overtones and the types of sounds we're making are subtle and airy, and it matched with the ghostly qualities that.
It seems like that was really true with the etching of the Transfiguration as well, which of course is just a phenomenal work, which could not have been created it could not be an engraving or a woodcut. It would have to be an etching,
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think that's really interesting that you chose to do that. I mean, it's a beautiful program, and I'm really grateful that we're recording it, because it'll be accessible. And I know American Federation of Arts is very excited about this program as well. And they'll have a link to it. So, it will be available more widely than just today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just have room for one more question, if that's okay. I guess kind of going off of what you were saying, Nancy. So how did you choose the specific artworks for your performance, and what aspects of these artworks inspired your music? You talked a little bit about the woodcuts there, but just kind of like the initial, kind of choosing part of the process. How did you kind of decide on these pieces?
Yeah. Overall, you may have heard that we've structured the trajectory from more pure sounds to the more noisy, like overtones, multiphonics, and oboes, and so on. So which all relate to the sublime. So we composed the trajectory of the artwork with both sacred and non-sacred, as you've also noticed. And also, some of the Sicilian folk songs, as Megan said, were paired up with the sacred themes, because so normally we don't necessarily, associate that type of overtone-rich singing with Italy, but the throat singing, or that like overtone-rich singing styles, are special, unique in the way that they put the performer in a certain type of awareness, in a certain state of mind. For instance, like in order to hear and utter the overtones, I have to first sing a fundamental, this bass, basic pitch, and then somehow adjust my tongue, and so that I can also, subtly control those upper whistly hidden tones over that. So I must focus heavily, but at the same time detach myself so that I can like do that subtle control. And achieving this requires a certain state of awareness, which means that it also puts you in a certain state of awareness. So that's why, because of this quality, over the course of history, the overtone singing or throat singing has been part of sacred meditation. And the whistly overtones were associated with spirit singing, or the fundamental was associated with the earth, while, the overtones represented the heavens, and so on. So these Sicilian folk songs, they're Christian stories. And, we, for instance, the one that about Christmas, Novena di Natale, because it was a celebration, we kind of like made it a pagan celebration more than that. So we paired it more, with both, adoration of the Magi, and as well as the Bacchanal in the forest. And we imagine this whole experience as a unique spiraling trajectory that the, audience journeys through as a whole. Did you want to add to this, Megan?
Sure, I can add real quick. I wanted to mention our interest in the technique of chiaroscuro, which we were thinking about particularly an allegory of virtue. So that's the technique of woodcut printing that allows for multiple gradations of light and dark values by using multiple blocks in the printing process. And so, this piece did connect with, it made sense thematically to connect with our troubadour song about the pains of love, but it was mostly that chiaroscuro technique that we really wanted to explore in what we were doing musically. So we made analogs to that technique through creating these different layers of light versus dark timbres, pure versus noisy sounds, and open intervals versus close intervals. So that's another kind of theme that we explored.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for crafting this concert. I'm sorry we've run out of time. And thank you so much to Nancy for your insight on European art and the Renaissance Impressions exhibition itself. So although this is the last day to view the exhibition before the museum does close at 5, there are a couple of exciting upcoming events. But before we get to that, Essen, Megan, Nancy, do you have any final remarks that you would like to add?
No, I want to thank both of them for working so hard on this program. I know it was a long time coming, and it's a great way to sign off on this exhibition here, but still have something that will live on. So thank you very, very much for your work on this. It was fun. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. I wanted to say, likewise, thanks so much to Memorial Art Gallery for giving us this opportunity to create this project. Nancy and Lauren, thank you so much for your work. The whole marketing and engagement team have been so supportive to us throughout this whole process, so thank you to them. And it's really important that we both mentioned that we could not have done this without the incredible, tireless work of our sound engineer, Henry Birdsey, and our videographer, Megan Matei. They just were so amazing, and we're so thankful to them.
And also thanks to our audiences today for joining us. And I'd like to say, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you get curious about some other things as you watch this again, because it's going to be online.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you again. That was wonderful. Just a couple of things. Senso di Voce has a sound installation opening this Thursday, February 10th at the Frontispice Gallery at the Art and Music Library of the University of Rochester. The installation is called Sounding Spaces Passage, and it will remain up until March 3rd. So Sounding Spaces Passage, just briefly, is a 6-speaker sound installation that reimagines Senso di Voce's live performances in a kind of soundscape form. So their music has always sought to build transformative passageways to join ancient and new, to connect across geographies and cultural traditions, to weave together the familiar and unfamiliar. So in Frontispice, they've created a piece inside a literal passageway, which is a space that carries visitors through an art experience as they travel to and from the Art and Music Library. Again, just a reminder, visitors to University of Rochester's campus are currently required to wear an N95 or a KN95 mask. And again, although today is the final day to view the Renaissance Impressions exhibition at MAG, we invite you to explore 5,000 years of world art at the museum's collection and other temporary exhibitions on view, such as National Anthem by Kota Ozawa and Sultana's Dream by Chitra Ganesh. So we hope that you all enjoyed this program, and we hope to see you again at MAG. Bye, thank you everyone.